Good morning and a warm welcome to you, Professor Braga. We're very happy to have you here at Atria, and over the time we've spent here, we've understood things and learned things, but we would like to share all this with a wider audience. So as we go into the podcast, I think we start at the beginning. Where did this journey into physics begin? And who was, who was this person who became Professor Braga? Could you tell us?
Sure. Namaskara.
Namaskara.
Thank you very much for having me. It's actually my pleasure to be here, and you are so welcoming. So thank you so much. It has been a wonderful journey this last week. So it's a long journey, right? Already. So I started with a book. At that time, there was no computers, no smartphones. Well, computers there were, but they were not so available. So we would read books, and my father was given a book on the stars, and it had something about the entropy. And this was written by Hubert Reeves. He was a very important scientist in astrophysics. And I read that book, and I loved that book. It was just my opening to the science, actually. And so I went to France. He was there. He actually went there to give the university I was to give a talk. And but unfortunately, I was not going to be there when he was for the talk. I was coming back before, but I left there a letter, and I was asking them a few questions in English, and then he just replied with a lovely letter and saying that it was about entropy, that my questions would be actually answered in this new book. So he sent me the book, and I was in awe. So, and then he asked me to go and meet him at the University of Aveiro, where he was going to give a talk in Portugal. And then I went there, and it was absolutely amazing. And I thought, okay, if the subject is this one, so I'm going to learn about things like entropy. And if all scientists, all physicists are like Hubert Reeves, Dr. Hubert Reeves, then I want to go to this field. And since this was what made me go 2 years later to physics. So then I entered, and of course a big deception, because they were not all like, not at all there were good professors, but they were not all like Dr. Hubert Reeves. They were not as generous, and this was a very rigid way of studying, where the professors are like this and we are like a little bit lower. And then this was difficult. It's a huge difference between high school in Portugal and the university. The way you are taught, how you go to the rooms. It's not one room, or you have practical lessons, theoretical and theoretical practical. I didn't even. So there was a sign saying TP and P and L in your schedule, and I thought these were the names of the rooms. And I was asking, where is the TP room? But this was not. This was theoretical, practical. So these small details that make your life difficult. And also you had to take a lot of copies, because there was no, of course, you will not have internet in Portugal yet installed, so you had to take a lot of photocopies. You spend a lot of time in the photocopy room, and this was outside the university. So this was small things that made your life as a student very, very difficult. And so we went, in the beginning we were 70, at the end we were only 2 in solid state physics and a few, 4 more or something in optic and electronics. So this was my journey. So the beginning was rough in the university, difficult. But then I had the PhD in the engineering faculty in materials. And this was a very nice surprise. I could learn much more from myself, and it was actually when I started to connect all the pieces, because everything was spread. Nothing had a connection when I left the course, the degree, which is something that I saw here that you can do. You can connect the dots when you are a bachelor, and this is so important, because I could only do that when I went to my PhD degree, when I actually had to relate subjects, relate quantum physics with materials, and for example, the electromagnetism with materials. So this was actually when you start relating things. Another stage where you also start to deeply relate things is when you have to transmit. For example, when I started giving classes, this was also a huge opportunity to go back to the basics, studying the basics, being always a learner, right? And connect the dots. So after my PhD in the engineering faculty, I could actually, during the PhD, go to France and have there also a mentor that unfortunately died. And then I finished my PhD, and I was able to make a course in Los Alamos. There was a nitrogen storage course, a week course in Los Alamos. So I applied, and I was given a grant to go. And in that course, because I had a lot of experience in diffraction, X-ray diffraction from Portugal, well, they asked me, we want you to work with us. And I said, okay, I have a sabbatical year. So I stayed there for 3 years in Los Alamos. So there I could meet a lot of interesting people, and I could actually have a very good experience with different instruments. That there was actually when I really started to put my hands on working with instruments. So for example, for the neutron scattering, to be working with high pressure deuterium, and hydrogen, for deuterium for the diffraction of neutrons, hydrogen for the spectroscopy, high pressure, neutrons, and high temperature. You have to be very aware of what you are doing, because something can go wrong, right? And you are working with these instruments at night or at day. You cannot leave an instrument without a sample, because these are very expensive experiments. So I was by myself in the middle of the night in a place where I had to deal with, control the hydrogen or deuterium, the temperature, the neutrons, and the pressure. And once I even had to control a rattlesnake that went into the equipment, because it was warm. So it was there, and we had to wait for the environmental protection to come and take it out in the middle of the night. Nice. So this was a huge control of myself that I had to have there, and to control and understand what I was doing. So this was difficult time as well, but it was a very rewarding time because I could learn a lot and meet a lot of people, because this was a user center. Then I came to Portugal 3 years after, and I started to work with something I had started in Los Alamos. That was a solid state electrolyte. Because I had experience with lithium, they asked me, "Oh, do you want to work on solid state electrolytes based on lithium?" And I said, "Of course." And so we synthesized the crystalline version of our electrolyte. And we had a project, and we synthesized, and I started to make simulations and actually calculating what was the pressure and temperature for synthesizing, because we can actually have those parameters if you calculate the Gibbs energies. So you can actually have access through ab initio to a lot of parameters, including the conditions of an experiment, of a synthesis. So this was new at that time. They didn't have anyone to make simulations. So they were actually in our project, FCT, our Science Foundation project.
Yes.
They were partners, but of course they didn't receive any. But this was interesting because they are also, we would make the experiments there, and they would have the simulations part as well. So this was when I was there, and I started with this electrolyte, and then I came to Portugal, and I could buy a potential starting this project, but I didn't have a lot. So part of the experiments were in my garage, between commas, because this is where in America, you know, the garage is very important for making things happen, right? So we didn't have a garage, so it had to be on my living room table. So we had there the potential start working because we didn't have where to put it. But in that, then we found some partners also in Portugal, and in that collaboration, we could actually realize that if we would synthesize the crystalline electrolyte as an amorphous material, first a crystalline, but then if we would allow it to phase change to amorphous, this would have a two orders of magnitude higher conductivity. Okay. Ionic conductivity. So it started like that. So then we had a way of synthesizing that was much easier with water, and at lower temperatures, as 250 or 60 degrees C. And and we were synthesizing, and we made a first paper that was very important, because after we published that paper, I had 4 American companies calling us. One of them, maybe the smallest one, already had licensed the crystalline version of our electrolyte from Los Alamos.
Okay.
So I thought, well, I'm not going to have someone with the license of the crystalline and another company with the license of the amorphous. It doesn't make any sense. So I started to interacting with this person, and this person actually, he was not into science. He had a bachelor in physics, but he could understand things because he had a bachelor in physics. And he was actually warned by someone from the Chinese Academy that called, because they were in projects, and he called him, and he was warned that there was, if this was true, there was something there. So these people from the US, these companies that are still working actually, and they are big companies, I had some interactions, but this was the company I chose to interact, the smallest one, because of this. And it was very serendipity. So because he asked me, oh, you have to prove that this is right, because these things of the Chinese academy, and then the Americans have this way of, you have to prove, right?
Yes.
So you have to prove in a big lab, because yours is but anyways, you have to prove in a big lab, and he gave me several options, and so I chose, of course, Professor Goodenough's lab. Because I also had I had actually read a book that was from Peter Bruce, that was a postdoc once of Goodenough's, and Goodenough had also there a chapter on solid electrolytes. So I thought, well, of course I want to go to Dr. Goodenough's lab. He was not. I didn't know him, of course. And so Andy, which is a person from the company, Andy said, okay, I'm going to Los Alamos, and I'm going to Austin, which is where Professor Goodenough is, and I'll be there making the electrolyte, and you are telling me how to do it. So I was, the day after, in Portugal in the morning, telling him how to do the day before, kind of the day before. It was the morning of the day after, but he had just a less one night to sleep, and he was there showing me, and I was saying, oh, do this, do that, and then he made the experiment that showed to Professor Goodenough, and he said, oh, I want to see more. And so I said, okay, I'll go there because I have a project in Portugal and I can travel. So I went there, and we showed again, we synthesized, we showed to him, and he liked, and then he paid all my visits after. So I went for 9 times in 2015. To show him every time I was
9 times in a year.
9 times, and every time I was showing him again how. And then at a certain time he said, "Okay, let's make a real battery." And so you need to stay, he said. So I said, of course, I have a sabbatical year, I will come, and I will stay for 1 year, and then. That 1 year was 3 years again. And so we made a lot of, and this was fabulous because being there was every day we had discussions in the whiteboard. Professor Goodenough never went to the labs, but he knew, he could see in his mind how an experiment, what were the outcomes of an experiment, what were the problems of an experiment, so he could visualize the experiment. He would only go to the lab to say it's chocolate time.
Oh, okay.
So because he was offered a lot of chocolates, because he had always the door open, and he had this laugh. It was a loud laugh, and he was known by that laugh. So the door was always open, and we would know that he was there because we would hear the laugh all the time. So everyone would pass, a lot of people from in the industry, academy, and they would go to enter in this office that was always open to everyone. So this was fabulous experience. We would discuss every day in the blackboard, and I get very excited with the results. And he was saying, "Sit down, young lady. I need more time. I need more time to think it over." It was really, and we were laughing and laughing. So it was fantastic time.
I would like to just add here for all those who are watching us that Dr. Goodyear is the inventor of the lithium-ion battery. So Professor Braga has had the unique experience of working with him for 3+ years.
Yes, for almost 4 years. So in this, No, and then I kept, after I came in 2019, he hadn't been awarded yet the Nobel Prize. So I came back in February, and in October he was awarded the Nobel Prize. And actually I was with him in London because he flew to London to be awarded the Copley Award. And then he invited me to go to the ceremony and be in the Copley Award. And we got this was an opportunity for us to discuss some paper that we had submitted and write the last. So we had discussed in the morning, and he was tired because of the time, of course, the jet lag and so on. And he was actually taking a nap in the morning, and so I received a message from my husband. I received a message saying "Gano," which in Spanish means one, just one. It didn't say whom, what. But my son was very into see who was winning the Nobel Prize this year in chemistry. He was always following this because we knew that there was a lot of probability, there was a probability, high probability that Professor Goodenough would win the Nobel Prize. And so I received this Gano, and suddenly I realized it's the chemistry Nobel Prize day. And this was in a second. I ran to his room. I asked the boy there that opened the door, and he was awakened. You won the Nobel Prize! You won the Nobel Prize! And he was looking at me. You won the Nobel Prize! And then everybody entered his room, came, and all the communication, all the people from the media knew that I work with him. So they start the TV, Portuguese TV was the first to give the information, because there in the US they were still sleeping, right?
Yes.
So this was more or less at 11 o'clock London time, Lisbon time, and they would call me asking him to give interviews. and so the Portuguese media was the first to announce.
In fact, you were the first to let him know that he's won the
exactly
Nobel Prize.
And also that he won the Nobel Prize, because the Nobel Prize Academy didn't know where he was, because in the US nobody knew where he was.
Okay.
So they had to wake up, and the secretary told them that he was in London. And so finally, after maybe more than 1 hour, the Academy had the call, and I was there when the Academy called him to say that he was awarded the Nobel Prize. It was a wonderful story, right?
And a wonderful experience. I think something you cherish.
Of course. And so it was so huge also for my family, because my son was with my husband, and he was the one that saw, and they were in the metro. So they made a huge, and someone asked him, "Did you win the lottery?" And he said, no. So nobody understood how was suddenly a celebration like this. So it was a wonderful experience. And then we had, while I was there in the US, we published this paper that was that made a lot of waves, good waves and bad waves. But then I think the bad waves were a little bit because people are not open to new things. Actually, not as new, because quantum mechanics and ferroelectricity has a lot of years, but it still didn't settle into some minds. And we received people from all over the world there that wanted to know more. From Google to LG, Tata was there.
Okay.
Actually, it was in Goodenough's house that we received the Tata. I think it was the son of the founder.
Ratanji Tata?
It was the son of the founder, I think, the young person that actually gave us some book on Salt, can this be?
Mm.
It's a very interesting book, and now the Tata family made the group.
Yes.
Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting.
As a woman in this field of physics and in STEM, would you have some advice for aspiring young ladies?
Of course,
What would be your advice?
it's a little bit more difficult, but we should never give up
Yes.
your dreams. And sometimes you have to postpone. When my son was born, I had the opportunity to go to actually have a position that opened in the faculty where I am now. And I applied, and I got the position. But I had 1 month of my son being born.
So he was an infant.
He was just a small baby. And I asked, well, because I had to start preparing, and I was giving before I was giving classes in physics, but in another institute I was still giving. I was always giving classes. I never stopped working. But when he was born, we are entitled to 4 months with the baby.
Maternal leave.
Yes, maternal leave. And so I asked him, can I give at least classes of physics that I'm used? I have already prepared. It's just an adjustment to the subject that you give here. And they say, no, I want you to give IT, programming. And I said, okay. So I thought, I'm not going to do both of the jobs right. So I better this time say, no, now I choose my son. And then I had to wait 5 years to go to another opportunity, to have another opportunity. But I'm very glad I chose my son. And we have to do, there are choices we have to make. I didn't publish for 5 years because of these things, because I was not, as I say, in the beginning during my PhD, I invested much more into conferences. I was going to every conference, giving talks, because I didn't know really that it was much more important to write papers than to go to conferences. Conferences are important to make a network, but not as important as to write papers, because from papers actually the network will also come. So it's much more important into academics to write papers and patents and so on. So I chose my son at that time, and I had another opportunity. And during 5 years, also because other problems, but also my eyes and so on, because I had several surgeries. I was almost being blindsided on one side, on one eye. So all these made that I didn't publish for 5 years. So I don't have a lot of papers, but still...
They're outstanding papers.
Still, thank you so much. But still, it was difficult for me to restart writing and to try to put ideas into the paper. And that is another thing. Portuguese, we are very baroque, so we are to say something, we have to give a huge travel through all the country to get to one place. In English, we are much more straightforward. So to make that switch, to start thinking in English, was very difficult as well. But now my husband says, you think much better in English than in Portuguese. So keep on thinking in English, because you are much simpler when you think in English. So this was something like it. So I had to choose. But if you are a woman, so as a woman, you have many more, I would say, demands in family life usually, right? In family life, you have you are much more from the home, right? And from the children. So, but don't allow, take that lightly. Don't allow that to determine who you are going to become. So if once you have to choose, okay, I will stay at home for X years, or I will only work in this so that I don't lose my way of, that is less than I would like to do for some years. And then, but I still can learn by myself, not lose the basics, and then the opportunities will come. If you really want something, the opportunity, serendipity
I was just going to
will
say.
knock on your door. There is, you have to allow life to reward you for wanting something so hard and work for it, right? So I think that you will find a lot of paternalism. When even in Portugal is a very paternalist, if not to call it other thing, country. So there was, it's so in the minds, it's so in the language, it's so into our roots that we don't even acknowledge that is there. I remember, for example, a comment when I arrived in 2019 from already being with Professor Goodenough and so on, and they would say, "Oh, who would say that a girl would do this?" So this comment is a little, is very, who would say, a girl, and I had 40 years old. So a girl, when am I going? It was actually intended to be a nice compliment, but it had so much paternalism in this, right?
Yes.
Who would say that a woman by herself, without the father,
Could do this.
Could do this, right? And it's actually someone that I think I actually admire, but these automatic triggers are much into the roots of our society, and so you get these and you but this also can be used to give you much more strength. And you say, okay, I'm going to prove you that I don't need the father to build a lab, to have good equipment, to have good people, which is very important, the people, and to actually make a good and honest job, the best that we can, to try to make something sustainable. So I would say, women, don't lose your aspirations. Don't let them somewhere, because if you really want, you will get it.
Wonderful. I think it's been really nice the way you put it across, because women at different levels have had different kinds of experiences, but the way you put it together was very, very inspiring.
Thank you. So
Moving on to, today's youth have a lot of information, have a lot of technology at their beckoning. Given the construct of today's world, where everything is changing very rapidly, technology is changing every day. At the same time, the basics don't go away, like you mentioned. And there is also the emphasis on to be able to read and to be able to use that to build. And given what we are trying to do here at Atria University, to bring in the doing and learning from the doing, while using the reading and the basis for building your fundamentals and taking it forward, what would be the message that you would share with the young?
That's a very interesting perspective and question, because I find it interesting that my students actually don't use the tools, even the internet tools that they have. They are kind of numb sometimes. They have all these tools, they have all these possibilities of acquiring knowledge, and they don't use it. It's like you have so much that you are being that you are being kind of bombarded with all the information that you suddenly don't know where to go.
Information overload.
Exactly. And they don't even use sometimes the possibility of ChatGPT or, sorry, yeah, I know that they are not allowed to use for example, classes and so on, but they should go there and be curious about and ask the machine, what do you think about this? And because it opens a little bit the perspective, it can give you a broad perspective of something that you were actually having to do in a book. However, it's dangerous, right? Because many times it will not give a good answer. So you have to be knowledgeable about, so that you can understand if the answer is correct, can be correct or not, which is kind of like a nonsense, but it's not, right? So at the end of the day, you really have to go to the books, because these are where you learn the basics. It can be books in your cell phone, right? You can have the Kindle or the, sorry for the PDF files. But actually, I prefer a book where you have paper, where you and also where you can highlight and where you can write your own notes. Writing is very important. It's the way you at least in my case, it's the way you can memorize or actually understand better while you are writing. So it can be a complement to what is being done here. It's very important what you are doing here, because there is a disconnect between subjects. Only with this type of education you can connect the dots while you are still at the bachelor's. It's so important. The only caveat I see is that they also have to have the basics. And actually, if you don't mind, I can make a suggestion.
Sure.
I would think that it would be interesting when you make the evaluation, the 15 days after the project, each project evaluation, that maybe you would also propose the studying, evaluate how the student had, what were the outcomes what he could understand for example, a book chapter in the not only the YouTubes and the papers, because the papers show you only the leaves. They will not show you the forests. It's very important to understand the forests, because a leaf can be a leaf that is there by chance. It will not give you the statistic of what you have. So for understanding the statistic, you have to at least see a book where talking about, for example, batteries in a broader
more generic context, which is where we you use the great books to read at Atria University. We introduce books that are not completely technical in nature, but they give you a broad understanding of what the domain could be.
That's also very, very important. That's also, and it also gives you the wanting to read books, right? Because you read it in this lovely garden. So it's fabulous. So yes, having a culture, it's always very important, because you will have different ways of understanding the subjects.
Yes.
But also in science, what I was saying was science, you need to have a broad perspective of your subject, then to go deeper. So I would think that it would be maybe interesting to kind of oblige, between commas, that while they are making the project, which is super important, the best way to go, they would also try to connect that project with, for example, the quantum mechanics or the electromagnetism associated with this. So being a little bit deeper into this, and then connect to the real life project, which is fabulous. So by complementing it like this, I think you are unbeatable.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.